Hey there. Welcome to my channel. Have you ever sailed on a big ship? How about a ship that's shaped like a dragon? Well, over 1,000 years ago, a fierce people called the Vikings lived by the sea in northern Europe. They made their homes in lands of ice and fjords and endless forests. The Vikings were tough and brave. They built amazing ships that helped them explore and raid. And they had exciting adventures across the seas. The Vikings came from Scandinavia, which today is Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. Back then, life was hard. Winters were long and dark, and food was scarce. So everyone had to work hard to survive. Boys and girls grew up learning how to farm, untend feeds. When they were older, the strongest and bravest became warriors. The Vikings loved to boast and show off their skills. They would hold contests to see who could throw a spear the farthest or swing a hammer the hardest. They also had a ton of cool weapons, including swords, axes, and shields. And the best warriors were heroes. But the Vikings weren't just farmers and fighters. They were also explorers and traders. They built long, narrow ships that were perfect for sailing in the icy seas. These ships were so special that the Vikings became famous for them. They sailed all over, to Britain, Ireland, Iceland, and even North America. Long before Christopher Columbus, on their journeys, they found new lands and traded goods with other people. They brought back furs, amber, and silver to sell in their villages. The Vikings didn't just sail around for fun or to get rich. They also liked to raid other people's villages. They would attack towns and steal their stuff. They were especially good at it because their ships were so fast. Nobody could catch them. They would sail up rivers and surprise people in their own homes. The Vikings were fierce fighters, but they were also clever. Before they attacked, they would send a message to the village leader, warning them to give up their valuables or face the consequences. Sometimes the Vikings would take prisoners, but if they didn't give up, the Vikings would burn their village to the ground. Even though the Vikings were tough and scary, they had rules. They believed in a code of honor and expected everyone to follow it. If a Viking broke the law, he could be kicked out of his group and banned from ever raiding again. They also had things or assemblies where everyone could talk and make decisions together. This helped keep the peace and settle arguments. Back then, women had more rights than in other places. They could own property and run the farm while the men were gone. Sometimes women led the Vikings in battle. The Vikings believed in many gods. They had one big family of gods, kind of like the Avengers. There was Odin, the wise and mysterious leader. Thor, the strong god of thunder. Freya, the goddess of love and war. The Vikings loved to tell stories about their gods. They carved pictures of them on rocks and buildings and wrote down their adventures in old books. These stories are now part of history and help us understand what life was like for the Vikings. Life for the Vikings wasn't easy. They had to deal with other groups who wanted to fight them. They also had to survive the harsh weather and find enough food for everyone. It was common for people to die, especially during battles or in the winter. The Vikings believed that if you died bravely in battle, you might go to Valhalla. This was an amazing place ruled by Odin, where warriors got to party with other brave souls. Valhalla was kind of like heaven for the Vikings. As time went on, many Vikings started settling down. They made farms and raised families in new lands. They left their old homelands and traveled to places like Ireland, France, and even North America. When the Vikings moved to a new place, they often changed the way they acted and believed in new gods. But they always remembered their roots and the stories of their ancestors. Today, we remember the Vikings for their amazing adventures and discoveries. We also remember how tough and brave they were. They explored and settled in places that had never seen people from Scandinavia before. They changed the world forever. Even if the Vikings are long gone, their story lives on. We can learn about them by reading books and going to museums. We can also look around and see how they changed the world for the better. So next time you see a big ship or hear a story about brave explorers, think about the Vikings. They were the first to do many things that people do every day, and that's pretty cool.